So I just got back from watching Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. I wasn't invited to an early screening or anything like that, but I did have the whole theater to myself on opening night. The movie was written and directed by Johannes Roberts and stars some actors that read some lines. But before we start the review, I think it's important that you all know where I'm coming from. In case you're new to my channel, I'm a pretty big RE fan. And as a fan, boy, do I have a lot to say about this movie. So I'll be doing half of this video as a review from a fan perspective, focusing on how faithful of an adaptation it was and giving you a recommendation that will probably resonate more with other fans of the series. For the second half of the review, I'll be looking at this as objectively as possible as someone that just loves movies, and I'll be focusing more on the filmmaking itself to let you know if this movie is worth your money or not. That way, if you're new to Resident Evil, or if you're a diehard fan, you'll still be getting a pretty well-rounded take on the film by the end. There will be spoilers, but you can skip to the conclusion at the end to get my spoiler-free recommendation. And finally, if you enjoy the review, I just ask that you please leave the video a like, as it really helps out my channel. Alright, so let's start with the fan perspective. This movie has been dividing the Resident Evil fandom worse than, I don't know, the switch from fixed camera angles, I guess? When it was announced that this movie would be combining the events of Resident Evil 1 and 2, it sparked a bit of concern from fans. People were arguing about this movie before we even saw a single frame of it, but it wasn't until the trailer dropped that the Great Divide really began. Some fans were really excited to see all of the locations and Easter eggs, while some haters were quick to point out that, you know, some of it looked pretty bad, but it seemed like no matter where you landed on that trailer, you were open to being attacked for your opinion. I myself made a parody video dissecting the trailer and was quickly met with angry comments from both sides. I was called a fake fan for poking fun at the franchise and was even told to kill myself for defending the music used in the trailer, which is kind of funny because I actually thought the song was a terrible choice, but I guess when they watched the video they just couldn't detect the sarcasm. Most fans probably missed it, but this is actually Lisa Trevor. She's doing her classic shh thing from the games. So I made sure to keep the joke very obvious in the reaction video I did.
That looked great!
In case you missed it, the joke there was that people were turning a blind eye to the concerns some fans had stemming from those trailers. I saw a lot of people hand-waving away any concerns about changes made to the lore or characters while celebrating the Easter eggs and references that were packed into the trailer, regardless of their context. The most obvious one from that trailer was probably Itchy Tasty, and if you're wondering whether or not you'll enjoy this movie, I think you just need to ask yourself how you felt about this reference. In a lot of ways, it makes for the perfect litmus test on how you'll feel about this movie. You'll either think, wow, what a deep cut, they really care and are including things just for the fans. Or you'll think, hey, well that's kinda dumb. I'm with the latter. For me, and I'm sure plenty of other fans out there, I've been imagining what a Resident Evil movie would look like for years now. Itchy Tasty is basically a short story that gives a look into the outbreak in the Spencer mansion. I always imagined the Itchy Tasty story as the perfect opening of the movie. You would be establishing that there's an outbreak in the mansion by seeing the dog keeper slowly lose himself to the infection unknowingly. His dogs get loose and attack some people in the surrounding forest, which is the inciting incident for Bravo team to be dispatched. From there you start introducing your characters. It's almost like it writes itself. Another option is to actually have your characters explore the mansion and find a file or two. They could read about the dog keeper, and you could use this as a window into the past, an opportunity to show us exposition through a flashback. We've seen plenty of other movies do this, so it's not much of a stretch, and it would have been a nice way to pay homage to the games at the same time. But we don't get anything like that in this movie. Like, at all. But enough about what I would have done. I'm not here to bore you with that. I just wanted to point out that if you like seeing Itchy Tasty or that Jill sandwich line, or if seeing the locations is enough to excite you, you'll probably get all you want from this movie. I'm just saying that it didn't work for me. But until the movie is released on streaming, or more accurately, until I can pick up a secondhand Blu-ray of the movie, I'll refrain from getting bogged down in the details. I'll be doing a more in-depth review similar to my Silent Hill retrospectives when I have the footage to make a better video for you all. But for now, I'm pretty limited on what I can show you, so I'll be focusing on the bigger things that stuck out to me. Let's start with the things that I liked as a fan of the games. I'm actually struggling to come up with something for this section. I'm not kidding. Everything you know and love from the games has been seriously altered in one way or another, and it's not in a way that elevated the material, at least not for me. I liked, some of the locations were cool. You saw them all in the trailer, though. It was really just the main hall of the RPD and the mansion that looked like they did in the games. Every other set wasn't replicated from the games. Some of them were close enough, I guess. I liked Leon being hungover for his first day. I think they just lifted that directly from the S.D. Perry books. That was nice. Though everything else about his character felt completely off, I did like that bit. Chris's costume looked good? Fuck, okay. Let's just talk about the stuff that made me sad. But from here on out, I have to warn you about... Alright, so let's just get this out of the way. There is no Barry, there is no Rebecca Chambers, there is no Hunk, Kendo, Enrico, Marvin, and even Mr. X are all gone. I would also add Sherry and Annette Birkin to that list of missing characters. It is true that you see them in the movie, but they are so laughably underwritten they might as well not be there at all. Every other character that did make it into the movie is drastically different from their game counterpart. For all the talk about capturing the essence of the characters, I had a hard time seeing any of it. Let's meet our characters. Leon's backstory has been changed so that now he's the son of some hero cop, and it's implied with heavy hands that the only reason he has his job is because of his daddy. It's also mentioned that he's been transferred to Raccoon City, which means he's not really much of a rookie, but whatever. His strong sense of responsibility and burning desire to protect and serve is all gone, and instead he's treated like some kind of incompetent buffoon, reluctant to help anyone. Which is also kind of what they turned Chief Irons into. He's no longer a crooked cop in alliance with Umbrella, but instead a coward that tries to flee Raccoon City. He is no longer a villain trying to capture Sherry, because again, Sherry isn't even a character in this movie. These two have a pretty wholesome and solid relationship, in the games anyway. But in the movie, Chris doesn't like his sister much, at least not at first. Apparently they haven't spoken in 5 years because of the whole Claire being obsessed with taking down Umbrella thing. That always rubbed Chris the wrong way, you see, because he's very pro-Umbrella now, and he looks at Birkin as a father figure. Very cool. In the game, she's always been defined by her cool under pressure attitude and level-headed nature, but now Jill is basically trash.
I wonder, what would be the most horrible way to die?
Jill is a little bit crazy.
What would the worst way to die be?
You're a freak, Valentine.
Also, she has very little to do in this movie, and she's in love with Wesker. Wesker, by the way, is now a reluctant villain. He feels really bad about betraying Jill and the gang, and his motivation for doing so was a boatload of cash, with which he would finally be able to move out of Raccoon City with. That's it. That's all of Wesker now. He cries and apologizes for betraying everyone at the end, which is actually another really cool deep cut reference to the games because he always wore his sunglasses to hide the tears. So a lot of people are probably wondering, was Ada Wong in the movie? And yeah, she was. So the movie does have a post-credits scene, and Ada shows up in a post-credits scene where Wesker is brought back to life, and it's revealed that Ada is the one that's been pulling the strings and offering him all that money all along. So no, we never see Leon and Ada together. Their romance never develops. Their relationship never buds or goes anywhere. That whole heart of Leon's story is missing from this movie, much like Sherry and Claire's is. And instead, she shows up at the end to give Wesker some sunglasses that are going to help him see. Ada Wong is the one that's been pulling Wesker's strings all along. And by bringing him back to life, he's now blind, and now the only way he can see is by wearing these sunglasses. Oh, we did it! We got Wesker in sunglasses, and Ada showed up at the end. Yeah, and I clapped. So, all of our characters have completely different backstories and motivations, and that really prevented any of them, in my opinion, from feeling like the characters we all know so well from the games. If you don't mind these changes, then that's fine. You might enjoy the movie more than I did. I certainly didn't think it was the worst part of the movie or anything. That right, of course, belongs to... Lisa Trevor was the worst part of this movie for me. And I think it's another perfect litmus test for any fan wondering if they'll enjoy this movie or not. She's a beloved character from the game because of her haunting and tragic backstory, but in this movie, she's literally Sloth from the Goonies. Almost exactly like I wrote it in my parody script a year ago, down to her showing our characters the path through the tunnels. I couldn't believe it. What I couldn't have predicted, however, was that we would get to see Lisa fight a licker. Oh my god. Holy shit. I laughed out loud. Luckily, no one was in the theater, or that would have been pretty rude of me. But yeah, I guess if you look at this absolute butchering of the character and appreciate it simply for being something different, then I guess more power to you. For me, them's the breaks, as they say. I could not overlook this one. I felt like it was a complete misunderstanding of what made the character so popular to begin with, which is pretty much how I felt about a lot of this movie, actually. Many of the elements taken from the games felt crammed into this movie without any real context or meaning behind it. And as a fan of the series, I was really disappointed. It's cool to see the locations and characters on screen, sure, but that's the bare minimum you should expect. And because the movie is constantly jumping from the mansion to the RPD and to the orphanage, it never really establishes these locations like it does in the games. You never really get a feel for any one of them, and instead it feels like you're being rushed through them like you're on some sort of amusement park ride. Characters never really have time to be established either, or even interact with one another too much because we have to keep things moving constantly. For example, Claire never even interacts with Sherry in the movie. One of the biggest story beats from RE2 is just straight up missing from the movie adaptation of RE2, even though the characters are right there on screen together. It made no sense to me. There's so much more I could get into, but I'll save it for the longer review when the Blu-ray is released. For now, I'm going to put down my fan hat and take a look at this as a horror movie. So this movie is getting a lot of comparisons to John Carpenter movies, which I find insulting. This stems from the director listing that as his major influence, which, by the way, is exactly what Paul W.S. Anderson did back then, and there were some of the same comparisons being made, believe it or not. This movie does have an 80s look to it. Unless it was shot on film, I noticed a lot of grain and grunge that were added to make it appear this way. The big difference with Carpenter movies, though, is that they all had well-crafted suspense sequences. They were very old-fashioned in how they were shot and structured. Oftentimes the camera would just be still, and if it ever did move, it was with a purpose, with a strong emphasis on visual storytelling. Here we get a lot of handheld shots, some shaky cam here and there, tons of jump scares. They even recreate the ugliest scene from Infinite Darkness in the mansion. It looks awful. Another really cool Easter egg, I'm sure. The movie is full of the same loud and in-your-face horror sequence that gets repeated over and over again, to the point that it moves from being predictable to just plain lazy. I don't have the footage, but I'll recreate the scene for you now. So basically, you'll have a zombie or something over here, right? And our character won't see it, right? And then, get this, from off frame, they're attacked by something else. Whoa! They repeat this trick about 15 times throughout the movie, like no kidding, and I was calling out every single one of them. That's not exactly what I would call a Carpenter-esque suspense sequence, but okay. This movie does use a similar font that Carpenter does to remind us of the ticking clock, so I guess it's just as good as a John Carpenter movie after all. The zombies in the movie all acted differently, which is kind of a nitpick I have about zombie movies. Sometimes they can't wait to eat you, and other times we need them to ignore you so that we can manufacture some suspense. There's also a lot of characters showing up at the perfect moment to join the others, or sometimes they appear just in time to save the day as a straight up Deus Ex Machina. I found that really annoying, and it happens at least like 3 times. I thought the performances in this movie were fine despite the laughable dialogue throughout. My personal favorite performance was Neil McDonough at the end though. I laughed out loud. Holy shit. There are so many problems with this scene, but again, I just want to wait and break this down. Oh my god. Other than that, no one really stood out to me one way or the other, though they were never really given much time to. The movie moves at a breakneck pace and never takes a beat to settle down or give the characters a moment to breathe or interact. And because there are like 6 storylines happening, our characters never really have time to complete an arc or anything like that. I imagine for casual audiences, this movie would be a bit confusing. Some major plot points are just mentioned once in a throwaway line and like never brought up again, such as the T virus and the G virus. And if you don't have years of playing the games to draw from, I could see the movie making less and less sense as it goes on for casual audiences. I actually was enjoying the movie for the first act or so, but then that relentless pacing and shoddy scripts start to catch up with one another, and the movie gets really messy. Characters are doing a whole lot while accomplishing very little until we reach the final part of our third act and things come to an embarrassing halt. I haven't seen an ending so rushed probably ever. It reminded me of like the old Jackie Chan movies that would just cut to credits as soon as the bad guy dies. It was kind of hilarious when the ending title card awkwardly cut onto the screen and you're left just thinking like, that's it? Really? Huh. I see a lot of people saying that by default, this movie is good because it clears the bar that Anderson's previous series set so graciously low. But I say why? Just because those previous movies sucked does not mean that this stuff should get a pass by default. To me, the whole thing felt incredibly mediocre and sometimes amateur. It started off well enough, efficiently establishing our characters and locations, but the movie moves forward at such a fast pace that it started to actually wear me out by the second act. From there, things start feeling very noticeably sloppy and rushed. Fans will enjoy seeing things they know, I'm sure, like, remember the RPD? Remember Moonlight Sonata? Remember Itchy Tasty? But for me, it's not enough to just include elements and characters from the games. That's not impressive. It's literally the bare minimum. It's the least they could do. And by hand-waving the obvious problems this movie has and praising it for showing us things we know from the games, we invite more mediocrity. So do I recommend Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City? Well, again, I ask, how did you feel about Itchy Tasty? Because for me, it's a hard no. Save your money, or maybe wait to rent it when it's available on streaming if you're curious to see what all the fuss is about. It's not the worst movie by any means, but it's painfully average. Again, I'll be making a longer review in more detail because there is a lot to talk about that I didn't mention. So when this gets a home release, please look forward to that. Until then, if you saw it, let me know what you thought of the movie. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.